Hello, and welcome to Creepycore and Folklore, the show about creatures, encounters, old tales, and myths. I'm your host, Iona Wayland, a dark fantasy author, mental health professional, and overall curious person. I want to join other spooky souls and hear about these unusual stories. Hello, spooky soul. I'm excited to introduce you to author, best friend, and horror movie lover, River Robbins. This is our first ever in-person interview. We'll just see how this goes. We decided to go to Pride, so me, my babo, and my husband, and then River and his husband all went, and it was a lot of fun. Welcome, River. I'm so excited that you're here in person.
Thank you.
Thanks for speaking with me and the fellow spooky soul who's listening. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. My name is River Robbins. I'm an author. I've written 2 books under a pen name, Dale Robbins. Both are in the thriller genre range, somewhere in there. Also, like you said, a huge horror movie fan. I watch them religiously. And I live in New Jersey with my husband, Chris. And yeah, that's it.
So like you were saying, River is like this huge horror movie fan, and he was actually able to get me to watch my very first horror movie, which was Halloween, which I was like so proud of myself after I watched it. I was like, wow, I watched a whole horror. I did a horror. And I was like, I made it. And so I was like feeling very like I had this like God complex where I'm like, I could probably watch anything. And so then his husband Chris was like, oh, well, my favorite horror movie is Hereditary. And I was like, yeah, sure. And so I watched it, and then I couldn't sleep for 2 months. And anything that made the
The clicking.
sound, yeah, I was like, oh God, she's here.
She's here.
He's up in the corner or something. Like, it was horrifying.
Very different horror movie.
They are very different. But
Going from Halloween to Hereditary is like going from taking like a teeny tiny shot as your first drink to drinking an entire bottle of tequila. They're very on opposite ends of the horror spectrum. And Hereditary would definitely scar you.
it did.
Yeah.
But I've started to overcome that little by little, even though I'm still a scaredy cat at heart. So like, for instance, last night we were all able to watch the Blair Witch Project because we took like a road trip after Pride to one of the filming sites. It was really cool. And I really love the Blair Witch Project. And I think it holds up today. Like, I think it's still, especially with like the whole found footage thing, it holds up. But what are some things about horror that draw you to it?
For me, specifically, I am really into slashers. I like a lot of the psychological horrors too. What draws me into horror is I like the realism side of it. Like, wow, this could happen to someone, or this could happen to me. You have some like Nightmare on Elm Street with a guy that stalks you in your dreams. It's like not gonna happen. Or Friday the 13th with Jason coming out of the lake. But I don't know, I've always found it interesting how there's elements of real life in those type of movies, and they really play on the fears that we have as a society with all the violence in it, especially, now there's not like a subgenre with like mass shootings or anything, but like they played a lot on what was scary for people at the time.
And like how each like horror movie kind of plays on, it can kind of encapsulate, it's kind of like with Folklore where it encapsulate like what's going on at the time. Like there'll be like we were talking before about monster movies and like things like that, where that's kind of changed to like now there's like cyber horror now that wouldn't have been possible. Like I just watched one about, I forget what it's called now, damn. But basically this person it's all done on someone's computer. Like the whole movie looks like you're from the point of view of the person on their computer FaceTiming their friends.
Oh, was it Unfriended?
Oh, it was Unfriended. I thought that was really good. Although I saw like, it's so interesting because all the reviews will be so diversely different. Like there will be people that are like, I love this, and other people are like, this was horrible. And it's so weird because then horror movies kind of have the middle ground where they're like, it just looks okay, but really it's because like so many people love it and so many people hate it. So I thought that was really interesting. So why do you think people as a whole are so drawn in the first place, and what are some of your favorite tropes?
I think people in general that like horror movies, you have those people who don't like them at all, which is always interesting to me when I meet people who don't like horror movies. Yeah. A part of me wonders, like, the people that don't like them at all, if it's real life is scary enough for them that movies or television shows or books are their escape. And then you know those people like me that just consume that stuff nonstop, and then it's still an escape. I think people that are into horror movies though are drawn to what scares them. So there's so many subgenres of horror movies, which is interesting because you like until you really break them all down, you have like your vampires and werewolves and your creatures, you have your slashers, you have your supernaturals, your zombies, your psychological horrors, like you said, cyber horror is a new one. I think we're gonna start seeing a lot of AI influenced horror movies with AI killing people. But I think people are drawn to what scares them most. Like for me, the first horror movie I ever saw was Halloween, and I was probably 4.
No.
Yeah, it was. I was staying at my dad's house and sleeping in the living room, and it came on TV late one night, and I did not understand that it wasn't real. So it was very scary. Just this like creepy guy in this white expressionless mask stalking this babysitter and killing people.
Like slowly and effectively.
Yeah, so it was very weird. Like having never, I don't know, at that point, not been exposed to like violence and killing and stuff in movies. It became very formative for me. So for years, I had constant nightmares about Michael Myers coming after me. But then it became more of a fascination over time. Like I think I was 8, maybe the next time I watched it, and it wasn't as scary. I was like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. And then it became ritualistic for me. I started watching it every year for Halloween. I got into all the other Halloween movies, and it really opened the door for me getting into horror movies in general. Some of my favorite tropes in horror movies, I really like slashers. There's a lot of sub tropes in slashers. You have your like final girl. Depending on which era of slasher, they followed a pretty similar pattern. You have like, don't have sex. If you have sex, you're gonna die. The one that has sex in the movie is like the first to die. So I really appreciate about Scream that Scream took the whole genre and made fun of it while still making a really good horror movie. And I don't know if you've ever seen Scream.
I haven't seen Scream.
It's so good. Like in Scream, there's the character, his name's Randy. He like is a horror movie fanatic, and he's like, don't do this because this is what's going to happen to you, or oh, you're this character, so you're going to, don't say you'll be right back because you won't, you'll die. So I've always found that really interesting about Scream. And they continue it through all of the movies.
Oh, I just know about it. Is that who's the girl that plays Wednesday, the lady?
Oh, Jenny Ortega.
Yes, I know that she's in one of them.
She's in the newest, she's in the 5th and the 6th movie.
Okay, that's all I know.
She's the main girl in them.
Oh,
she's really good. It's a very different character from
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's like, I don't think Wednesday's her own like.
Yeah.
Thing. So
but she was good in them. But yeah, I really like specifically with Halloween, Jamie Lee Curtis being the strong like the brain, the babysitter, the brain. She was the like book smart one, which I guess is kind of John Carpenter's, and then later on filmmakers comment on sex in general. Like you shouldn't, like, and if you're a woman, you shouldn't do it because it's because you'll get murdered. Yeah. But I always appreciated her character, how just like smart she was and how level-headed she was, and it translates really well into all of the future Halloween movies she's in, even though some of them are really horrible. But But I really like that about slashers. I don't like the ones that I like. What I don't like about slashers though is how they'll always have, like, depending on the filmmaker, there'll be like just like gratuitous nudity,
Oh yeah.
just like for the sake of shock. And
Yeah.
Halloween's one of those movies, unfortunately, but everyone after was like, let's take that and like make it a whole thing. So I don't like that. I don't.
Boobs.
Yeah, it's just that. And a lot of the movies, and it like doesn't carry the plot. But like, I mean, it's, I guess, become so common in the genre that you couldn't really have a slasher without it.
You have to have nudity.
And if you're blonde, you're gonna die.
Oh,
like,
yeah, for sure.
so that sucks.
Oh, isn't Jamie Lee Curtis blonde?
She's like brunette-ish.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I love.
But yeah, if you are blonde, you're gonna die.
If
you're a jock, you're gonna die.
Oh, yeah, that one.
If you have sex, you're gonna die.
Yes.
If you do drugs, you're gonna die. If you drink, you're gonna die.
Yes. See, that is very indicative of the time. Well, also like of society being like, ooh, don't be a bad person because this is what makes you a bad person. As if that it's like down to that.
Yeah, here's all these things that if you do these things, you're gonna die.
It's very like persecutorial, like sinning adjacent.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
I'm glad we've gotten away from that.
Yeah.
In movies, like, even though Scream is one continuous, not movie, but series. Thank you. I like that they've evolved with the times, even like throughout, like the first, second, third, and the fourth came many years later, and then they just rebooted for the fifth and the 6th. It's adapted.
I like that. I like whenever there's like a series that can breathe, like where the genre breathes and moves with the, like, I don't know, like with the times, and then they don't get tired and stale. Like they're able to keep up. And those are the things that I like about certain horror movies, which is probably why Hereditary freaked me out. But also for me, the things that I get really freaked out about are like anything involving like demons, possession, anything like that, because then it's like, oh my God, I don't know. I'm like, I don't understand it. And the way I was raised was like, oh, that's definitely real and it'll definitely happen if you do anything wrong at all, whatever that even means. Yeah. So I was just like, even though I don't believe that anymore, I'm still like have that deeply rooted in me. So anything that's like with Hereditary, where there's like possession adjacent type stuff, or like I don't want to ruin it if anyone hasn't seen it, but like anything like summoning something or like ushering something into this world, I get very freaked out. Whereas I really liked so like right now my favorite horror movie, because I think it counts as sci-fi horror maybe, is Nope. I really liked Nope. I really liked that it included horses. That was like a whole thing. I know.
It's so you.
It is. And they were like, they knew what they were doing. And it's also really difficult to film horses. I'm not in like, obviously not in the film industry at all, but I've heard that it's hard to film horses. And I could totally see that. They're so smart and they're so difficult to train. But then once they are trained, they're like incredible animals. And so the fact that they had so many horses and they did a whole bunch of like twists on things, yes. Like they're like usually like the black horses or the black animals are the ones that die. I know that sounds like really weird, but it's just like, oh, black and brown people are the ones that are killed first always. And it did a total turn on that, even down to the horse. Also, like there was stuff about like the one, I don't want to ruin it, but the one named Lucky, like if anything's named Lucky, it's gonna die. Like something bad's gonna happen. But this time, like, I don't know, like Lucky had a chance. There's just a lot of cool things about it. And then the whole like running a ranch that goes downhill after the owner dies, but it's a family business, is absolutely something that happens constantly. So I felt like it was realistic to a certain extent. And I also had this really uncomfortable feeling while watching it, because I know I talked about it in my very, very second episode ever. I talked about El Chupacabra and how our family had this coyote problem and how we had to kind of like come up with a way to keep them away and kind of outsmart it. And that whole like invisible stalking entity is something that I taught. Well, I have that in my book because it freaks me out.
Yeah.
But I loved that it incorporated that into Nope, because it's like, we need to protect this family, we need to protect our land or our farm or our animals or our livelihood or whatever, and like people are banding together to outsmart something. I really, really liked that. So that's what I'm drawn to. So that's my favorite horror movie right now. What's your current favorite horror movie?
So I am kind of a little bit of a snob with horror movies because
Don't say.
yeah, there's a lot I don't like. Like we can get into that later, but I like one that I find myself revisiting all the time. Jordan Peele in general.
Oh
I adore his movies
He's
so
so
much. I still cannot get over Get Out. That movie was very scary. For different reasons than most horror movies, which that's what I appreciate about his, is it's a comment on society in a more blatant way than like a slasher. You know, you have some elements in there that are like, yeah, this is, you know, we had this satanic panic going on back then, and so it's sprinkled in there. No, it's like a very clear call out of society, and Get Out is one of those movies that made me so, like, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I was so uncomfortable watching it, and I'm like rooting for the characters. And what I like about Jordan Peele's movies in general, including Nope, is how smart his characters are. Like, I appreciate that he doesn't take the typical oblivious character to everything happening around them, and you're like screaming at the TV the whole time. Like, what I appreciate about Nope is that the whole title of it came from the idea of when people, specifically like when Black people watch horror movies and it's like a white character doing something dumb, they're like, nope, don't go in there. Oh my God. Yeah. So I love that they sprinkle that in the movie. Like, nope, I'm not doing that. There's some like creepy stuff happening in front of me. Nope, I'm turning around and walking away. I appreciate that about his movies so much. I really liked Us as well. That one it's so interesting how his 3 movies so far are so different.
They are so different.
Like, not even closely related.
I liked Us, but it's not in my top favorites. But I get why it is for other people. Like, for you, like, it's one of your favorites. And you were telling me some of his, like, hidden Easter eggs and, like, things like that.
There's so many. Like, his stories are so well thought out. And Us, I did not expect the twist that happened in it at all.
Not that I didn't like it. I still really like Us, but I think that's what made me not as like on the edge of my seat, because I totally called it from that moment. But I also wonder, I don't want to spoil it if you haven't watched it, but like I think it's because I do research into like creatures a lot. And so whenever I was like, oh, that's kind of indicative of, and then skip ahead like for 10 seconds of it, like I'm going to whisper it, a changeling or something like that. Like, even though that's not what was happening, but I totally guessed that was what happened, like, immediately. Especially like, oh, our daughter had something horrible happen to her and she hasn't been the same since. I'm like, I think I know. But that is really cool because it was talking about like Us had all these societal symbolism type stuff sprinkled in.
Yeah, like I like how it was a kind of a commentary on how we treat like poor people. Like, you know, in the movie, without spoiling it, the other people like are not, they're us but they're not us. So that was really creepy. Another movie that I cannot get over, like I can't watch it often because it messes with me, is Midsummer.
Interesting.
That one was it's a very specific subgenre. Like, it is like cult horror, pagan horror, folk. I think technically it's called folk horror. Yeah, like there's like The Wicker Man is another one that was similar. Both deal with like a pagan cult. So that one's really interesting because my mom, like growing up, my mom was very into paganism. She still is today. And I'm super into Swedish culture. So it like checked off every box for me. And then as I started watching it, it also has like a lot of like family trauma and all that. Oh my gosh.
It was like specific. It was like the perfect storm.
Yeah, and there's like without spoiling anything, there's some of the scenes in there, like when I watched with my husband, he actually like screamed, which was very, which was very scary.
That definitely adds
There's
to
like
it.
one scene involving a cliff, and
Oh.
he every time we watch it, he still like gasps really loudly, and it freaks me out. But I think that movie is really interesting because it shows how, like, who really is good, who really is evil. Like, a lot of movies will have very clear lines there, but it shows how trauma and mental illness and all those things can kind of like blur those lines for us. Like, it's not, life isn't so cut and dry. So it's one of those movies where you kind of evolve with the character, the main character, Danny, and you could start to see why she makes some of the decisions she makes out of anger or spite. But oh my gosh, that I hope they never do a sequel to it because they'll ruin it. But I love that movie so much that I think about it all the time.
So even though I'm a wimp and I can't really watch horror movies, I read a shit ton of horror books. I love horror in the written form. But what's funny is about you describing like, oh, you evolve with the character. I saw that when I was reading You, like the book You by Caroline Kepnes. I think. Yeah. And I was like so drawn in. I know that's not a horror per se. That one's more like stalker thriller. Yeah, like suspense, I think it is. Which I do like those kinds of elements in movies too, but suspense really messes with me too. Like I can't, I'm like, just like, we need to know the answer. But that same thing that happened where I like Joe, the main character, I don't think this is a spoiler. I think, kind of like, and I was like, well, he can just like that guy's so annoying. Like just kill him and then move on with your, and I was like, what am I saying? Or like, there would be moments where you like can feel his loneliness. I was like, why won't women just love him? Where I'm just like, what the hell am I saying? He's a creep. Like, what am I doing? And so it was like kind of that weird, I don't know. It was that like you evolve with it. And same thing with Danny where I'm like, well, I know who she needs to pick. Like, I'm not gonna, no spoilers, but at the end where I'm like, I know who she needs to pick. I would pick this person.
I'm so mad for her.
Yeah, I'm mad with her for her. Yeah. Like, she doesn't deserve this. She needs to take back her power. And then you get like power hungry almost with her. It was very interesting. It's like, someone called it, I saw this like really good breakdown of it on YouTube, but now I don't remember who did it or the name of it. But basically they were like saying like revenge. It's like revenge horror almost, or where it's like goes into the psychology of like, when do you stop? Like, when is enough? Why do you feel the need to get revenge? What is it about justice that isn't like fully carried out? It gets very deep. But those are the kinds of things that like horror movies can make us like think about. But as much as like you love horror, I'm starting to love horror movies because I do love horror too. I wonder like what are some of your like no's for you? Like what makes you not like horror movies? What makes a shitty horror movie in your opinion? I know for me, something that everyone is like, gasp. Like, how could you say such a thing? Because I do understand that it was like an element of its time and it did really good cinematography. I think it told story through cinematography, which was a little bit different than before. You didn't rely on like Dutch angles and shit like that. Like it was able to, well, I actually do think it had Dutch angles, but it wasn't like it punctuated some of the scenes through its cinematography. Is Silence of the Lambs, but I don't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't like how it's the intelligence thing. I think again, where like, can you just like stop and think for like a second? Like, not necessarily in the fight, flight, freeze mode, but like whenever you're trying to like figure something out, like what Clarice was trying to do, I was just like, why? Like, so for instance, she goes in, this is like one of the first scenes. She's like, it's like, stay away from the inmate. Don't go close to him. Stay like whatever feet apart, even though there's plexiglass separating them. It's like, you have to stay away from him. And then the first time there was a problem, she like runs straight up to the glass and is like, save me. And I just hate it. Like from that moment, I was like, hated it. And I'm sorry, I don't like the character of Buffalo Bill. I think it's cheap. I think they threw the kitchen sink at it. They took all the things people were afraid of and put it into like one character, or things that people don't always understand or are judgy of. So they had like, well, in case you haven't seen it, don't spoil it, but they took like queerness, they took neo-Nazism was randomly in there, it took skin suit type thought. Like I was like, what, who is this character? Like the character didn't make sense. It seemed like it was just like a bunch of different elements just like thrown at this one character. And I know that's like a really unpopular opinion, and I do not judge you if you like it, because I know a ton of people love it, and it's for many different reasons. Like the pacing is really good, the cinematography is incredible, the acting is amazing. Like I love like there are so many things to love about it, but that's my disclaimer of like those are the things that's what did it for me. Was when I think what kills me is like damsel in distress and like a bad guy that doesn't make sense. Like I think those are the two things where like it needs to like not necessarily like the villain or the creature or whatever needs to be like this crazy super intelligent like convoluted thing, but that they need to like make sense to me. So that's my like vent moment. What are your least favorite ones?
I actually agree with you on Silence of the Lambs. I found it very boring, and like you can't say that in the horror community, but yeah. I just found it really boring. It focused too much on the characters, which like I feel like there's a fine balance. I feel like you said, the pacing was good. There were a lot of like cinematography was good, acting was good, but I was just like, this is so boring. Like I also watched it though when I was extremely only into thrillers and supernatural horror. So for me at the time, I was like, this isn't really my thing. But even revisiting it, I'm like, it's still not really my thing. I feel the same way about it's a very controversial take on this movie because everyone loves it for no reason. But Psycho, I don't like Psycho at all. I probably watched it way too late in life. I tried watching it years ago, and it's just like, it just starts off so boring. I think it's because it's like black and white. It's very dramatic. Like everything about it's dramatic, but boring at the same time. And it starts off really slow. The pacing is beyond slow. And I recognized that it inspired so many of my favorite movies, including Halloween. Literally, some of the characters in Halloween are named after characters from Psycho. Like Marion Crane is Marion Chambers. Sam Loomis, the boyfriend, is the psychiatrist in Halloween. Like there's so many things intertwined there. They literally cast Jamie Lee Curtis, who's Janet Leigh's daughter, the one who played Marion Crane. So, but I just find it really boring. And it kind of goes with how you feel about Silence of the Lambs. It's like damsel in distress. She literally is like on the run because she just stole this money, and you're not really told why. And maybe that's meant to be the suspense. It was also one of the first horror movies, so like maybe they just didn't really know what horror was at the time. It was something new. Yeah. But like she just steals this money and is on the run, and like things she does don't make sense. She like sells her car for another car in front of someone that like is possibly the police or an investigator. And like she knows she's being watched, but she does it anyway. And she like carries on her journey. She's in this like weird hotel, and then Norman Bates doesn't make sense to me. He's like weird and creepy for no reason. Yeah. And then you're not really given a motive on why he kills. And like obviously the shower scene is like one of the most iconic scenes in any horror movie ever. But I don't like that it happens halfway through the movie. Like that's cool. That's something horror movies don't really do, killing their main character. But then it's just like, okay, is it over? Can it be over? Are we done? And it's not. It keeps going, and like he just keeps killing like other people or trying to kill other people, and it's not really explained. It's just like, oh, he's just weird, and his mother is there, but you don't see her. And then what I don't like about it, and I'm so sorry for anyone who hasn't seen Psycho, but then again, I don't recommend it. At the end, when he's caught, it's like kind of revealed that he's maybe has like an altar or something. Like, not a fan. And he also dresses up as a woman when he kills. He like assumes his mother's personality when he kills, and he speaks in a really high pitched voice. So it was also 60 years ago, so I don't know. He wasn't explicitly stated to be gay or anything, but it feels very like, oh wow, this is, yeah, I don't know. Very, yeah, queer phobic and just also unexplained. Like it would be like more okay if it were like explain, yeah, but it's not really explained at all. He's just weird, and I don't think the acting is good. Especially like
because overacted.
It's very overacted, and especially the car scenes where they're just shaking the car and it has the green screen behind them. They had to do that back then, but oh my gosh, it took me like 3 tries to actually finish the whole movie.
Like, you can't suspend your disbelief as well.
No, I had to force myself to finish the movie just to say like I've actually watched this movie. So I didn't like that. I don't like damsel in distress usually, unless it like makes sense.
Yeah.
And like another movie that I think that did that, but in a good way. It's not really horror though. It's Gone Girl. Like, but that was like
that was also a twist on damsel in distress.
it was like I like that they kind of flipped it, and it kind of goes with like how we were talking about Midsummer, where you're rooting for the character, but it's kind of the opposite. Like, maybe some people were rooting for, like, I know I was the first time I watched it. I'm like, yeah, girl, like I don't know why you hate your husband so much, but go. But like when I rewatched it, I'm like, okay, it's a bit dramatic, but I like that they flip the damsel in distress thing. But I just don't really like those movies. I also don't like torture movies. I was into Saw back in the day because I didn't know any better, I guess.
I heard the first Saw. I haven't seen any, but I heard the first Saw was good.
It was. The first couple were good, but they don't hold up. I think like one of the worst that I've seen that I admittedly liked because it was unique, but then I will never rewatch it, is, oh my gosh, Human Centipede.
Ooh.
1, 2, and 3. Like it just gets
Worse.
The first one, like it's kind of believable, but beyond that it gets like there's no way like 60 people are connected to each other like that. But I don't like torture movies like that. Maybe because like it could happen, like torture does happen, and I don't know. That's like a subgenre that I just can't get into that much for that reason. It's especially if it's like all about special effects and gore. To like,
wait, didn't you say it's called Gorno?
Yeah, torture porn, Gorno.
Yeah.
I just don't like it.
Yeah.
And I know some people do. Like, it's what's so interesting about the horror community is everyone has like a distinct subgenre that they cling to, and then the other ones that they like, and then the other ones they absolutely hate. But for me, I don't like the Gorno.
Because I know that, like, for me, something I really like are, like, the monsters. Like, I love the monsters. I love the creatures. I like the sci-fi sometimes. Especially if it's well thought out, kind of like Nope. But where, like, it makes sense and there's all these different, like, thoughtful, intentional, foreshadowing written works, like, hints all along the way. But I really, really like it. But I know you do not really like the creature movies, especially not like the old creature movies. And it's funny because I remember the first one I feel like I said the first one I ever watched was Halloween, but there was one that was playing on cable, and I don't even remember where. I was like in a sleeping bag somewhere. So now I'm just like, I have no idea where this like disembodied memory is coming from. But it was about this man. It was in black and white, very damsel in distress kind of thing. But this guy like was clearly in like a tinfoil suit, but he was supposed to be like an extraterrestrial, but like a mecha or industrial extraterrestrial. And that came down, and he like saved this woman. He was killing everyone with his like one laser beam eye that went back and forth, but he like saved this one woman. But it scared me so much. And then I remembered seeing information about it. I really don't know what this movie was, but it said that there were some goofs in it, and I remember that finally helped me like not be scared of it anymore. I think I was also like a couple years older, but like some of the goofs of it was like he accidentally put the outfit on backwards so you could see the zipper in the front at one point.
Oh my gosh.
And it's so embarrassing. And then they also said that the excessive use of like that like pew pew like was like ridiculous, and that people were like annoyed because he like exploded too many things with his laser eye. Like, and there's a lot of different stuff, and like where the damsel in distress lady was supposed to be like fainted or whatever, but sometimes she would like roll over and not be passed out anymore. Like, it was just like very inconsistent, and finally that helped me like break out of being afraid. And so I like that we're able to talk about some things like that we love and things that we don't like, because it can help me watch more because I can look at it more from like a critical lens and maybe be slightly less scared, like 10% less scared.
Yeah, I don't know. With the monster movies, I just am not a fan. And maybe it's because I have this thing with, I like some black and white movies, the old Hollywood films,
Yeah.
but just in general, I don't. And maybe it'll come with age. I don't know. Like, I just haven't, there's so many classics I haven't seen. There's something about some of the monster movies that is like comforting. Because they're so old, it's like very clearly not real. It's more of just, you can watch it for entertainment purposes. Like, I remember when I was younger watching those on AMC or whichever channel they'd play on for the Monster Mania, the month of Halloween, or the month of October for Halloween. But I think because of what they had to do to make them, because it's very clearly not real, I can't sink into it too much. So, but I do really like Scooby-Doo. It's like not really horror. And Goosebumps, and like I like those kind of monster ones because they're unique monster ones. Like I feel like all of the horror movie monsters like Dracula and Nosferatu, all of those are like so ingrained in pop culture that I'm like, yeah, it's just not my thing. But when I've seen them in like Goosebumps and Scooby-Doo, which like they're not the be-all end-all of like monster shows, but I've enjoyed them in that sense because I'm like, that's really different. Like, that would probably never happen, but I like those in those settings, and maybe because it's nostalgic for me because I grew up watching both of those. And like, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Ooh.
Those are all so good. I still watch Goosebumps with my husband.
Oh my god, that used to scare me so much.
They're
Like,
so scary.
I would hear the like dun 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 dun, dun.
Yes.
And I would have to like turn off the TV. Like, I was like, I can't.
Something bad's gonna happen. The one that still gets me, and I don't know why, it's the one where it's like, don't go in the basement, where the dad becomes the plant becomes the dad.
Ew.
Like, yeah.
Ooh, that's very.
And
like,
it locks him in the basement.
That's very The Last of Us.
Yes, it was very formative for me. I think it's like my parents, like when I had watched it, my parents were like recently divorced, so like it was like an adjustment period for me. So it's like, oh my god, dad is like working all the time, and dad is like a plant, and he's bleeding green, and like so weird. Also, the Haunted Mask one, that one still holds up today. Like, we just watched it last year for Halloween, and when Carly Beth has the mask stuck on her face, even though the editing on it's horrible, and they've like it's just that everything about it's bad. Like, the acting's bad, but it's a children's show from the 90s, but it still freaks me out so much today that she's gonna be stuck as this monster. But like, I like those monster ones, like I said, though, just not necessarily the old ones. But it's funny you brought up the bloopers in it, because I always find that so interesting. Like, I have to know everything about a movie if I like it, or if I hate it. I have to know everything. I have to watch like breakdowns of the symbolism and why they did this, but I also love watching bloopers. More so if I don't necessarily love the movie, because if I do love the movie a lot and I watch the bloopers, then I'm like, it loses its magic. But I love watching horror movie bloopers, especially some of the older ones, because they had such limited time and money. And film reels cost so much, they just had to like go. And some cool technology came out of it. Like, they had to get really creative with what they did. There was this one that I saw, I don't remember the name of it. I didn't watch the movie, I just saw like a clip of it. It's this movie from, I want to say the 30s, maybe the 20s, 30s. This woman plays a witch, and she's like, she looks normal, and then what they did is they used red and blue over the camera, and she had makeup on, so when they pulled the one lens off, her face gets really dark and old looking because of the makeup they put on her. And it made her teeth look really scary, like just in the blink of an eye. I just saw that a few weeks ago, and I'm like, that's so cool they were able to do that. Yeah. But I don't know, some movies, like, it took me forever to like Nightmare on Elm Street. I still don't like Friday the 13th that much, because it like was such a direct response to Halloween. But some of the stuff, like some of the bloopers in there are interesting. Like so much time and money went into making these movies, and like things get overlooked. Like I'm an author, like that's happened to me with my writing many times. But it's just interesting to me that like in a movie format, you can overlook like someone, you can see the cameraman here, or like a shoe, or like you said, the costumes on backwards. They just have to, it's like there forever. It's a part of it. I just think that's so interesting that can happen.
So before you go, well, you'll be hanging out with me, but before we end this, I have a fun game we can play, but like horror movie related. Would you rather be the final girl or the first person killed?
That's a good one. Like I've always thought about if I were in a horror movie, like who I'd be. I would like to think I'd be the final girl, but I honestly think being the first one killed would be the most interesting. It sets the whole tone for the movie. So if I had a really interesting death scene, like Drew Barrymore in the original Scream, I'd be down for that.
I'll die, but it has to be iconic.
Give it meaning.
It has a purpose.
Yes.
It has to affect everything. I love it.
Make it memorable.
Memorable death. What horror movie character would you most want to meet?
I would say, I feel like this one's easy. I would say Laurie Strode from Halloween.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yes, Jamie Lee Curtis's character.
Yes.
Especially in later movies. Early Halloween, and she's just a teenage babysitter who, like, some horrible stuff happened, obviously. But later on with the reboot series, she is messed up, and I find that so interesting.
I like it kind of because it's like this is the effect of trauma,
and she's so fixated. Like I feel like that would be the normal thing anyway. She's so fixated on like where Michael is at all times and what happened to her and like the anniversaries and stuff. So I would love to meet, I would say like 2018 Halloween, Laurie Strode. She was very broken but still very lovable and fun and badass. She was very badass.
And last question, if you could be any horror creature or villain, who would it be?
That is a good one. I would say I would be Ghostface from not from Halloween. Oh my god, from Scream. Not Michael Myers. I find Ghostface interesting because it's always a different person. It's like always a different person or different people. There's multiple people. But I've always found it cool how like the why behind it. Like when you find out why they did it, it would never be me, but it's like I'm that person that you wronged like 10 years ago. Remember this? Or like you killed this person in my life. So now I came back to seek my revenge on you. Yeah. I think that's interesting. It's never the same person, and they're all motivated by different things, but like weirdly go after the same people. I don't know, but Ghostface is interesting.
I could totally see that because we were just talking about how like the character needs to make sense and like there needs to be reasoning behind it, and Midsommar was such a big one for you, and that has a lot of like revenge plot or justice plot to it. So I do really love that. Like I could totally see, I wasn't expecting that one, but now that makes total sense. Although I was totally expecting Laurie Strode for sure. Yeah. I knew it. Well, thank you so much for your time, River. I'm so happy you're here.
Me too. Thank you for having me. It's so much fun.
Oh, it's so fun. You can find his books on Amazon under his pen name author Dale Robbins. In other news is his debut novel. It's kind of like reading about an episode of Law and Order SVU, but it's more focused on the survivor and like survivorship of a traumatic event. And then last Thursday is his domestic thriller. It amazes me, your range. Like I was like, damn, like I can't believe this is by the same person. But Last Thursday is his domestic thriller. And it took me on a journey. That was another one. I'm like tempting fate with these, like, no spoilers, but like, oh my God, it definitely, speaking of revenge, like, I was rooting for the exact wrong things the entire book.
Yeah.
I was like, do it. Just do it. Well, they deserve it. Or like, this will make you feel better if you just do that. Like, I was on the wrong side of history with that book.
And then at the end, you're like,
wait,
am I?
who am I? What have I done? It's so good. So, and they both are really, like, beautiful stories. I would say, like, in other news is like, it's just a very beautiful survivorship story, and it's realistic, fortunately and unfortunately. But Last Thursday is like, I don't know. I just, like, can't believe I had such different emotions while reading both books. I was, like, questioning if, like, what kind of human I was at the end of Last Thursday. But the links, if you're interested in reading his stuff, is below in the show notes. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thanks to all you spooky souls out there for listening to Creepy Core and Folklore. Follow on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok if you're looking for more uncanny content. If you have your own tales to tell, you can email creepycoreandfolklore@gmail.com. If you liked this, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, or tell a friend who might enjoy these stories to spread the word. If you're interested in dark fantasy, check out my Hollowverse series. Ashes is available now in paperback and ebook on Amazon and audiobook on Audible, and the sequel is underway. I'm Iona Wayland, and I'll see you next time.